2, 3.
Welcome to all our comrades around the world to the Socialist Sunday Stream.
Welcome everybody to the Socialist Sunday Stream. We're live, people.
Yay!
Hello.
Hello.
We got the pleasure to have with us Catherine. Say hello to them peoples. With a teeny tiny bit of lag. But we got Catherine in the house. We got Julia in the house. Julia, say hi.
Hey!
Yo, what up? And we got Dumpster Flower. From now on, DP. DF. DF. Or the D. La letra D. Welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining the call. It's a pleasure to talk with you all.
Hello, thanks for having
The
us
pressure
here.
to be here.
So Dumpster Flower, tell us what are you up to? What do you do generally, like on the tubes and outside of the tubes?
What am I doing on the tubes and outside of the tubes? Well, I don't know. At the moment, I'm working on the second part of my series about organizing, doing leftist organizing in real life, which is, I suppose, kind of brings together two of those things in one go. So yeah, at the minute, I'm working on a video about how I think some of the strategies the left has used in organizing have been not very effective, and how there are some that maybe aren't done enough that we could do more of.
That's fantastic. I mean, there's never enough. There's so much to do. Like counting on. It's like we have like homework for 2 or 3 lifetimes.
Yeah, well, I think it's because I think, the last 10 years has been this huge growth of like awareness of left-wing content, and BreadTube and stuff like that is a big part of that, and all the podcasts and things that have grown up. And I really think like the propaganda game has got really good in a sense, and the information carrying, but I also think that there's still a step that needs to be taken to actually try and put some of these politics into practice in real life sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I actually came to doing this from a background actually of having done. So I first was politically active at university, which was because I'm about 30 now, so it's about 10 years ago. I suppose I just came to it in the last year as sort of from that background, I suppose, rather than from the YouTube background initially. Although I know a lot of other YouTubers do have a lot of history in that as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I have more or less the same. Like I've never been super incredibly active. Like I've been in the squatter movement in Madrid, and I've been in collectives and in social centers involved all my life. And now it's like I'm 40 something, and I feel like I'm super deactivated. Like the YouTube thing is the only thing. You go to a demonstration every now and then, and I mean sometimes that's as good as it gets.
Yeah. Well, why have you changed, Javi? You become deactivated in recent years?
I think since I left the country, basically became a migrant. I left the country, and that when you're a migrant, it's very difficult to be politically active because you got to deal with the language of the country you're in, and you got to know people. You don't have any connections. You don't know anybody. You're there like, and it's very awkward. You know a few people from work, and people from work when you have like an office job, they tend to be, very in the system. And you try to revolt people in work, like, talk to them, in their lunch break or whatever, and go like, hey, this is going on. Eat the rich, feed them to your cat. And, sometimes you get some backlash. What do you know?
Yeah, I totally know how you feel. I know this feeling.
You have the same at work and being a
Not just
migrant.
at work. Yeah, about everything, even with the language. Like, yeah, just started the new course and
How are you dealing with
trying
German?
to.
It's got to be difficult as nails.
It's super difficult, as
Catherine
you
can
can
tell you a
say.
thing or two about German. Right?
Sorry, I just got off and cut back. Sorry, what are we talking about?
About your expertise in German, because Julia is struggling with it a little bit.
I'm from Austria, actually. I don't know anything about Germany, but I can
No, I mean the German language.
speak a bit of German if you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Pardon?
I mean the German language, not Germany.
Oh, okay, yeah. Was möchtest du, dass ich sage zu euch?
Yes. Sorry.
So this is very
But it's-
shameful for me because I'm half German and I did not understand a word that you just said.
Yeah.
My German's appalling.
Accent.
But,
Dee, if you could tell us a bit about what you've learned so far about activism in your life and what strategies that well, actually not just you, but everyone, what your strategies would be to implement activism in your life and what you think we should be doing.
okay, well, yeah. Well, I want to start by saying that no one has like concrete answers to this stuff. This is all like the kind of thing where you have to sort of, if you're pinning your flags to a post, you've also got to accept that some other people are going to have some other ideas that might be just as good, because, you know, none of us know how to overthrow capitalism, or we'd have done it already. But yeah, I mean, I suppose, so in a lot of my life, I mean, I've been involved in some movements which I think did some really good things, and some which I think maybe didn't achieve very much. And I think, you know, one of the big problems I've seen on the organized left in the UK, I think, is that sort of complete prioritization for me of sort of marches and rallies and, you know, going out in huge numbers and you know, this is a really good thing to do in a certain sense, and it's really important that there is a public reaction when certain things happen. But I sort of feel that a lot of the left fixates on these events and sort of feels like we've done that, we've done something. Now we can go on with the next thing, probably building for the next march and rally. And certainly in a lot of the sort of more mainstream left, the Trotskyist left and things like that, which are not necessarily my sort of left, but still they're very obsessed with this sort of stuff. But even on the anarchist left, you know, I've seen a lot of groups that get into this cycle, and it becomes, I think, it just sort of keeps justifying itself on, oh, we have to react to this and we have to react to this. But I think what it's missing is having a real grounding in the communities that you're actually trying to speak for when you do these things. So like in the UK, in the last 10 years, we've had huge movements against cuts and things like that, against austerity and, you know, the stripping down of our social services and all of that. And I think that more effort was put into, and I'm not saying no one's been doing the other thing, but more effort in general has been put into trying to have marches and rallies and effectively just ask the government to stop cutting budgets, which they clearly didn't want to do, rather than going out and organizing closely with people who are affected by these things and trying to take action with them to help affect change in, you know, an organic way, and trying to make sure that your communities around you are organized and engaged. And this I think not only is more effective in trying to sort of attack these problems at the local level and also try and provide sort of community support and things when people are deprived of stuff, but also actually will make all the other things, the marches, the rallies, occupations, and, you know, occupations and direct actions are pretty good things. I'm quite in favor of those. This will make all of these things better. You know, we, at the moment, a lot of the left is quite isolated and sort of has its own little bubble. And I think this is sort of rather like how we try and reach out through YouTube. We should be trying to reach out in person in our workplaces and in our communities and win victories like that. So that's sort of the thrust of some of the ideas that I'm thinking about at the minute in that direction. I can go on if you want, or does someone want to say something else? I've spoke for quite a while
No.
Don't worry.
there. But there is this very excellent book called Chav Solidarity, which came out recently, which I mentioned we might talk about on here, which I think relates really closely to this, and which I'm going to talk about a lot in my next video, which is by a man called D. Hunter, who is a British anarchist, or at least he's been on the anarchist scene. I don't know if he still self-identifies as that. And he came from a really incredibly difficult background, and if you read the book, there is some really, really difficult reading in there, which certainly requires a content warning. But he talks about he really sort of tries to contextualize the experience of living at the bottom of society, and he was homeless from in his early teens and doing like dealing and sex work on the street to survive and things like this, and very engaged with a lot of people with some very bad ideas, but also seeing a lot of the incredible solidarity that exists between people at this very like low end of society. And he talks about things like when he was sort of 13 or something and doing sex work, how the other teenage sex workers would all have little codes that they did with their hands to indicate how long they thought they'd be gone for or something like that, and that if someone overstepped boundaries and things, they would get together and try and fight back and protect each other, which is quite an astounding level of solidarity and community organization in an incredibly oppressed and marginalized group.
Wow.
And so the book's sort of about his experiences with this and trying to contextualize for people like myself, people who come from a more middle class background, who maybe are sometimes not so accepting of some of the behavior of people who've grown up under extreme conditions, to sort of contextualize these things and try and help the left relate to these sorts of people who've had these really difficult experiences. And he's arguing that sort of community building should be very central in the work that we're doing. Also, I want to mention that he's really clear that it's not about the white working class or something, that he talks about it intersectionally and understanding the working class as more than just British white people, but as like cross-racial class with gender and sexual dynamics of its own. And he talks about trans people and people of color who he met in his journey and things like that, and how these really extreme conditions affected them and their lives as well.
That's something. I mean, why
Yeah,
are people being so shitty lately with sex workers? Mostly on Twitter. Have you checked it out?
Yeah, no, I saw this. Was it Gutian, or I don't know how they pronounce that.
Gushin.
Yeah, they did a video on that just earlier today, didn't they?
Yeah.
I saw that. Yeah, it's really ridiculous, isn't it? That I've known some sex workers in my life who are good friends of mine, and talked about their work relation and things. And obviously there are some dangers and things that go on which are way beyond anything I have to deal with in my life. But in my work, I'm self-employed and I often work from home. And some of the problems, like clients not turning up on time and missing sessions and you losing out on money because of it and things like that, are so actually similar to a lot of other forms of employment. The argument that it's not a normal form of work, I think, is utterly bizarre.
I think it comes from religious sentiment, from all the oppressive religious things that, sex is kind of a taboo, and people who work in a taboo area are like marginalized instantaneously, right?
But then you get it in the feminist movement. Sorry.
No, I would say like sex itself, it's a huge taboo, just to talk about sex and sexuality, it's a huge taboo. So can you imagine anyone that is actually involved in this topic that's very marginalized, even if like there is some specific areas in psychology that people actually study sex and sexual behavior, and even these professionals, they very like marginalized inside their own profession, because talking about sex, studying this, it's something that is a huge taboo, like people don't talk about it. It's the same thing when we actually are talking about having sex education in schools. People get very like, oh my god, they would teach our kids to to have sex and shits like this, when it's not exactly about this. But and even the word, like even talking about and mention this and say like, hey, this exists, this is part of life, everybody does it, like so most of everybody that is sexual people who's not into it, but like most of people actually does it. So it's something that it's still is a huge taboo, even if it's like daily life. But you can imagine how people who actually works directly with this suffer from marginalized situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, but unfortunately, beyond the religious side of it as well, I think in the UK we have, just as we've got a really unpleasant strand of social reactionary thought in the left which supports TERF and transphobic ideas, we also do have a number of like quite swerfy sex worker exclusionary people in the left as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I found it really weird. There is a not really an anarchist group. It's one guy who runs a Facebook page that used to relate to an anarchist group that closed down because that guy was being a dickhead a few years ago in my area. And this guy now still calls himself an anarchist and anti-fascist, but uses his page to post horrible transphobic and exclusionary stuff quite a lot of the time. I had an argument with this person about sex work, and it was really weird that every argument that they brought up against sex work, like, oh well, what about child trafficking, or what about sex slavery, or what about the high risk of like assault and things, and these various sorts of dangers, and all of these different arguments, I was just like, well, yes, but that's exactly an argument for giving sex workers rights,
Exactly.
allowing them to
Yeah.
move into a more formal position so that they can be protected from these sorts of practices and have more legal rights. I
Exactly.
mean, the argument against it is really the argument for it, as far as I found a lot of the time when talking to people about that.
Yeah, it's when people are talking about guns too, like you don't use criminals as an example, like, okay, yeah, this is a crime, we're not talking about this. This is actually a way to prevent that other crimes like this can happen, like it's very frustrating to have this kind of conversations.
Yeah, and I mean, philosophically, how do you like sex work? It's like sex, people can rub to each other, freely, no problem, if we didn't have like all the oppressive systems that we have. And it's like rub against each other, no problem, be free and do it your way. But and then it's like why should there be like an economical transaction to it? I understand like the abolitionist perspective philosophically, but then again, if we analyze the situation in which we are right now, it's like there's people there who are caught in that wheel right now. What do we do to protect them, to make them not suffer? And it's like it's not so difficult. So I understand, that yeah, of course we like why pay for sex, for something that should be non-transactional, that should be non outside of the capitalist wheel of commodification. I understand that completely. But then again, those people, they're being pimped. They're being abused by clients and pimps alike. And and some of them are managing to do like a little freelance career by themselves, and absolute respect to those people. Yeah, what I'm saying is like, what do we do with the people that are now in the systems in the way they are now, and how can
Yeah.
we transition to, you know, sex is this free thing that everything you know, that it is free for everyone, and it's understandable that, you know, that everybody can do it with anybody, you know, if we get out of our bullshit mind, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think this is the problem with the sort of moralizing viewpoint on it, isn't it? That it ignores the people who are there and very much doing the thing and need protection right now. So
Exactly.
I suppose on this abolitionist thing, for me, I would say, like, you know, it's one of these things like no ethical consumption under capitalism. You know, there's under capitalism, there's probably always going to be that trade, and we're always going to have to deal with it. And yeah, if we get rid of capitalism, then, you know, maybe the sort of incentive that makes people sell sex won't be there, and people just be able to satisfy any needs they have just by, you know, free interaction with people and all of that sort of thing. But in the meantime, you know, I think while we have capitalism, we have to acknowledge that this is there, that, you know, a lot of people take a perfectly rational choice to like take the risks of doing these things and stuff like this. And I think actually it's really interesting to look at it in the context of the way that over history, sort of escape professions that allow you to move outside of the normal capitalist framework, and particularly ones that allow women to move outside of the capitalist framework, are often very highly repressed, very highly criminalized, or legislated in such a way as to try and disempower women or general people who are trying to engage in these sorts of practices.
Yeah. I mean, and in sex work is not only prostitution. There's like all kinds of different types of sex work. So everything needs to be looked at like in its own specific way. Like it's not one big balloon of sex work, and it needs to be treated in this one way only. This is one of the things that bugs me about dealing with politics all the time. Like it's a very general thing. It's like there's always people out there making like all kinds of blanket statements like this solution is good for everything. It's gonna solve the world. It's like, oh, no. It never works like that in real life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's also really interesting to think about sex positivity, and I'm curious what you think about it, because I think sex positivity is a potentially problematic idea in a way, because it tends to be really individualistic in its perspective. It kind of ignores the wider structural issues associated with sex and consent. Sorry. Sorry, Javi, what did you say?
What was the last bit of that? I didn't hear the very last.
Oh, I was just saying that it's quite, sex positivity is quite individualistic because it ignores the wider structural issues associated with sex and consent, like you know, kink shaming. It's be made to feel guilty about things that they enjoy sexually, and people should feel safe and confident in their sexual practices, but takes place in private with no connection to the wider system or wider issues in general. I think there's like sex positivity is used to encourage us to all buy sex toys and lingerie, etc. And it's kind of this constructed identity where we're encouraged to buy into an order to make us like us easier to become like more easily become market like consumers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same with things like veganism and all these different kind of constructed identities.
Yeah, I think like veganism though, is sex positivity not one of these things where maybe there is quite an authentic, positive, consensually based version of it, which can be, you know, feminist and intersectional and genuinely positive, as opposed to a liberal commodification of the notion and, you know, guiding people towards just the consumption of sexual products and material.
Yeah, I mean the problem in here seems to be like common to both trends. Let's say like neoliberalism. It's like a modification of an idea that would be good, but they make it into products. It's like let's sell all of the stuff. No. Ain't gonna happen. Not under our watch, motherfuckers.
But I'm interested, Catherine, in how you phrased that about how it can reinforce some of the structural problems around sex in our society. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that. I mean, are you suggesting that maybe sex positivity is something that our society is not kind of fully ready for yet because of the sorts of oppression we have here?
Yeah. I think that it kind of ignores the power relations that currently exist in our society, and I don't think that, I don't know, any women that I've spoken to or people who identify as women end up having these kind of sexual relations, feeling like that is a way for them to be empowered, as if they're taking, that's like what it means to be, they're taking back their femininity or taking becoming empowered through that, when actually it ends up having the opposite effect because of the kind of harassment and power dynamics at play that hinder that from actually being the case. I think society, of course, everyone would be sex positive and have a good relationship with sex and be able to do whatever they want, but current system, I'm a bit skeptical as to whether that's currently the case. But I need to read a lot more about it. I haven't fully. I think it's just that the sex positive paradigm can really encourage us to view sex work as like an individual choice, which is celebrated as a form of empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, whilst I think it should be legalized and there should be unions and everything like that, it really ignores us to, it really kind of gets us to ignore how patriarchal capitalism restricts to get well-paid work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, you know, I think it's good that you expressed that after me and Javi, as two men, just put our views on sex positivity. I don't know. Again, having seen people engage in that work, I must say, you know, I don't think it is entirely a positive thing, and I don't think they'd like it to be made out to be entirely a positive thing. But I think that's sort of. But then, I'm not sure if that's quite the same as sex positivity not being entirely a positive thing, and people feeling, insofar as it's people feeling well adjusted and sort of open in their relationships and approaches to them and things like that. But I don't know. I think maybe we should listen to you a little bit more on this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
No, like I said, I still need. Sorry, Peter.
I can't hear you anymore, Catherine.
Yeah, I can't hear you either.
You either.
Yeah, I think we're having a
Connection problem. But Julia, what do you?
I'll leave and come back. Maybe that will help.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Julia, what did you think about this? So that it's not just lots of men talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, because this is actually the as weird as it looks like, it's the first time I ever heard about sexual positivity. I never heard about that before.
Oh, really?
But yeah, really, never heard about it before. It was like encouraging to buy like sex toys and things like this. So I never heard about it before, so it'd be like weird for me to make a comment. But from outside, I could say like, I don't know. I don't know how this. I can understand how bad this can be when it is this issue that it's only for the purpose of people buying more stuff, than actually talking about problems. Because even if we have this, sex is still a huge taboo. But in the other hand, I think at least we start talking about it, and encouraging people to talk about it. The problems that usually when we talk about sex, it's usually connect with like deep intimate stuff on us as human beings, and people don't actually want to open it that much in that point. And it's usually when you can see like different sides of one person, like sex, it's still dealing is still something that it's very deep inside us, and we don't actually talk much about it. Still is a huge taboo, even if we are being more open about it. If it is just for products, I don't know how the result of this would it be, but at least we are talking about it more, at least we know that this exists. I don't know if it makes sense.
Oh, I thought that made a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Because I
No,
sorry, because I also have friends that, like, I have close friends of mine. They actually discussed about touching themselves, touching their own bodies. They actually really discussed. They think it's dirty and it's like it's wrong to do it. You should not do it. And that was just how they were raised. So it is a huge thing if you can hear someone say like, hey, no, it's okay. It's not a problem. But yeah, that's why I would actually like to listen more about sex positivity than since that I had never heard about it. But I know like more than it's mainly with girls, and unfortunately, but most, like, I know more than one girl that actually she is disgusted to actually touch himself. So talking about sex positivity with people like this maybe will be something that it can be more positive effects than negative from the beginning. I don't know, but I never heard about sex positivity, so I would love to know more about it. I know
So,
about body positivity.
well, I suppose it's kind of
I think
similar. Sorry.
I definitely, I think it's really good that we start talking more about openly about masturbation being normal and like different types of bodies and like and that women feel as if they can go out and have fun and everything like that. I do think that's important. I think that the problem for me is more the fact that when I've spoken to a lot of my friends and my own personal experiences, it's often been like we go out to have different sexual experiences to feel as if we're like sexually empowered and having fun and all of that, but then often end up in these situations where very disempowered. For example, we feel like we can't assert ourselves enough to say that we want the person we're with to wear protection, or we get into a situation where halfway through we no longer want to have sex with that person or any kind of like stop what's happening or and all sex positivity in many ways. I think in a lot of ways it ends up, you end up being in these situations where equal, and because of these power dynamics, you do end up putting yourself in like potentially dangerous situations that or set yourself about the way men are socialized to be, feel like, oh, you can't say no, or feel like disempowered from asserting yourself about contraception and things like that. But these are just my own personal experiences and experiences of my friends. I'm sure for many people, sex positivity has been really liberating for them. And so once in the conversation about sex positivity, that it's not just purely this incredible thing, but also that it can be damaging in some ways.
Yeah, and I could hear, like, just feel things that you said, because it's broken a little bit. But the things that I could hear about it is when we were actually describing abuse situations during sex, when you actually, like, you want to wear protection and then your partner doesn't want you, and then you it's he kind of, or she kind of, like, mistake and sneak not to wear condoms, like, these situations happened even with me before in other situations. So and also when you don't want to have sex anymore with a person, but you guys are just there, and you get to a point that for some reason it looks like you cannot say no. This is all this things, this kind of situations, they all abusive situations, when you, of course, you can say no ever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you guys are already naked, on top of each other. You can say no, and you can put your clothes on and walk away. But it's just like, we are raised in a very sexist, because I think when we're talking about these kind of things, we have to remember that we still live in a very sexist society, and we are raised not to say no. Actually, we're raised to think that sex is something that only men can enjoy, and we just there existing, But yeah, and anyway, so
Sounds
but
like
we still,
patriarchy for me.
yeah, exactly. So
But-
we still have to remember that we're still in a sexist society, very patriarchy still here. So we start to deal with two problems at the same. They actually not two problems. They just one problem that if you divide it and you try to break it down by little, you will start to see, like, it's just a huge problem that we have with sexism in society, patriarchy. It's just a huge thing. And then we started to break it down, and then we're gonna have, like, inside of a good movement that I don't know, I never heard about sex positivity, like I said before. And then the little that I was thinking, now you can see, let's put it as something that can be good. And then we still have these situations, we still have sexism here, that would influence in other movements like body positive too. We know that it's not still, like, ideal, because we dealing with just more than, yeah, let's be more open about sex. It's more than this. It's way more than this. Because inside this we have to discuss other things inside the relationships we're building, like, because sex is still a small relationship. If you don't actually know the person, doesn't matter, you have a relationship with her there. And we are raised in this mindset, and it's against this mindset that we have to fight for it too. I don't know, I don't know if it makes sense.
Makes a lot of
No.
sense.
Okay.
Makes a lot of sense. I think, though, one thing to say maybe is a more positive thing about sex positivity in this context is to say that one thing which I think, and as Catherine says, there are different ways of sort of taking it, and certainly some of the ways that that she described sound like not very sound like they're going beyond empowering to sort of people encouraging themselves into abusive situations. But in that sense, I think almost the conversation we're having now, and having conversations like this, and being comfortable and open to talk about sex, because I think a lot of the time, like, these experiences, like you talked about with the people not wanting to use contraception when you do, or wanting to stop and things like that, often these things are invisibilized because there's such a taboo about talking about sex at all. And I think maybe making it more open in our sort of wider conversation and public conversation to talk about these issues can give potentially people some more feel more right to feel like, make them feel like they've got the right, make them feel more supported when they want to make those decisions, so they can say, no, I know about this situation, these things are not sort of okay to happen, I don't want this to happen now, and I'm totally right to make that decision.
Yeah, if I can say something, I think this is also connected when we're talking about sex workers, because if we think inside patriarchy, that the woman only exists to like to give pleasure, it's not something she can enjoy too, or the other person can enjoy too. You're just there to give pleasure, and like I was saying, you're just there existing, so it just this is also a way to humiliate the other being there. As actually rape, it's basically about this power, having power and humiliate the other person. And when you're talking about sex workers, and it's like most of people are like, how can you go to work like this, like you giving your body to free humiliation, and that's not how we should think about sex, and not how we should deal with sex workers, because it's I don't know, for me it seems like they all these issues connect with the same kind of mindset, with the same sexism in society. It's how society sees sex, and how society sees women inside society. It's also how they see sex workers. Like most of the insults you give to a woman, they relate it to sex workers, or sex in some way, you know um that's what I think, that it's in the end connected.
Yeah, I think what should be like happy people rubbing against each other and being super happy gets totally spoiled by all of these contaminations, like the relationships, the power imbalances, and the transactional bullshit, and then the Catholic Church saying you shall not rub against each other because God didn't approve of that shit. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and actually, like it reminds me of a documentary I watch on Netflix. It's about some rapes that were happening in Catholic schools, I guess in US. I don't know, in
Oh,
Ireland.
we
I
got plenty
don't.
in Spain. I can tell you some stories.
Yeah. But this one is the name is The Keepers. Like, and they describe and they talk about sexual activities and what happened there, and where was happening the abuse itself, like, and why was the abuses, and how the abuser were actually controlling the victims. Like, it's very interesting, because they have this contrast again, like we have people who represents the church, and they also go through abusive um, situations, and they became abusers at some point, like, and you can see like those sexist, very sexist and conservative speeches that they were raised into it, and how this is connected, and how this translates for their sexual behavior, like it's interesting. I don't know, it just crossed my mind now.
Yeah,
It's a very
I
interesting
heard someone commenting about these priests that are like sexual abusers, that
I think
they abuse on young children, like boys now, because they're more handy. But
Mhm.
like in the past, they used to abuse more on young girls because it was what they had in hand, and they apparently were circumstantial predators. Like they just abuse because they can. That demonstrates that there's one more crumb and that thread of breadcrumbs that takes us to the conclusion that rape is an act of power, never an act
Yeah,
of sex.
yeah, exactly. This is actually against young girls. This one, it's a school only for girls, and it's not just the girls, but also the nuns involved. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting because it is definitely about power and how, but it's also interesting to see, like, to hear their speeches, and you can actually see in their speeches, even if they were about religion and about the Catholic Church, they also had, you could see like the abusive behavior inside the speeches too. It's a really nice documentary. I mean, I couldn't finish because it was very hard to finish. They very open about the abuse that happened there. So it's very hard to finish, but as far as that I could watch, it was good to watch, like in the point that you can start understanding like this abuse, and you start to reflect about the Catholic Church.
Yeah, they should
And
be decommissioned like they used to in the revolution during the Spanish quote unquote civil war.
yeah.
Like in the 1930s, like in the smaller villages, and shoot the local priest. That's a good solution. Just saying. I mean that did happen in a video game.
In a video game. Yeah, I think I saw a movie about that once or twice as well.
Have you seen Tierra y Libertad, Land and Freedom? I think by Ken Loach.
Yes, I've seen that. I love Ken Loach. I love Ken Loach's films.
Big fan
Absolutely.
too. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of a ripoff of the Homage to Catalonia, the book by
Yeah.
George Orwell. But it's a nice movie
Yeah.
to watch. It's a
Absolutely.
lot of feelings and things, but
Yeah.
it tells a story. It tells a story from those days, and yeah. I mean,
Very
they shot back the priests. They shot back as well. They shot people. They were armed with guns and everything. They collaborated with the fascists and everything. But
Yeah,
smaller villages, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and you see in the film, it's portrayed like that. They do shoot the priest because he was shooting at them from the bell tower.
Yeah.
Before he was sniping at them, and he killed people first.
Yeah.
And I think, am I right? You probably know better than this. I think there was even, it was very much more about being a fascist than being a priest. Because I think, am I right in the Basque country where the priests were more sort of close to the population because of some of the independent stuff, that a lot of the Catholic priests there were more on the side of the revolutionaries and less on the side of the fascists?
Yeah, but it depends on every village, to be honest. And in the Catholic Church as an organization, they promoted heavily the coup d'état, the Francoist coup d'état, the fascists. They were on the side of the fascists all the way.
Were they not the first ones to recognize Franco? I think the Catholic Church.
Yeah. They had like full support. Basically, Franco was was their man, and this depends on really, like when you get out of the big cities in Spain, and it still works like that in a way. Like when you get out of the big cities, everything is different circumstances. Like you can have like a mayor from this party that is on a national level is right wing, but is behaving left wing in this very small village, and go like, what's going on in here? Sometimes they just use the brand. They don't care much about the politics. They fix whatever they need to fix in the village, and everybody knows each other. It's totally different dynamics than in big cities. Which is what we're used to do right now, right? I don't know about you people. I'm a big city kid. I don't know if you people are raised in big cities or smaller towns.
My city's quite small, but it's still a city.
So,
mine was big.
basically. And what's your experience, Julia?
What with the son? I grew up in a big city too. Like, actually, my city is, it's just smaller than Rio de Janeiro, but it's right in front of it, so it's the same.
And Catherine, you're still there? I don't know. We may have like lag issues. We'll fix it. Let me go back to Twitter. But yeah, no, I mean they're totally different dynamics, and
Mm.
the Catholic Church very much sided with the fash, which is kind of a problem. But
Is the
yeah,
Catholic is the Catholic Church still very powerful in Spain? Because you know,
yes,
in the UK now, I think in polls recently we're majority secular now. Like there's more atheists or people who don't believe in God than there is of anything else. So I think we're often insulated from the effects of like very religious communities in the same way, or a lot more of us are, because it's so much less common in the UK.
yeah, no, in Spain the Catholic Church is still very ingrained. They have like this cult, this sect called the Opus Dei, the work of God, and they have people in every position of power. You gotta pay like a lot of money to be a member in it, and they can set you up as a minister. They can set you up as a big company owner. They can set you up as a secretary of something. They basically can fix you.
The
So
equivalent the equivalent of going to Eton and Oxford in England.
there you go. But this
Yeah,
is like a religious,
yeah.
small club of very powerful people. Well, not so small actually.
Wow.
Yeah, they make you like have like a lot of children, and they make you they make you do like a lot of crazy stuff for religion's sake. You got like those things in England, right? Oxford and Eton, you said.
Uh, we have like some religious communities, but I think that they're a lot rarer in the UK that you have these very strict religious communities. I think there's so many people who are not religious that the church has very little power in the UK today.
I think Rene is mentioning the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Hmm?
The Archbishop of Canterbury could be.
Yeah, well, we have some bishops who sit in the House of Lords and stuff like that, but I don't think they're. I mean, in everyday life, like most people, probably don't have a church, probably don't have a priest, and probably don't know who the Archbishop of Canterbury is or what they're doing. I don't think they don't really have a huge, I love the cow. They don't really have a huge influence on public life in the UK anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
The priest tells you what to do, and people are just like, well, why do we care what the priest says?
I think
Although
that's a very good thing that you have like in the UK generally. Like the people are very independent to whatever the media or the big powers or the big figures are saying. It's very very common to talk to authority figures and say nope. It's like a very cultural thing, I guess. And
I suppose so.
Um, I wanted to ask you actually, this might be a good way to segue into the next topic, but because you were talking about how you had a workshop on how to life from different political ideologies and things. I'm curious, like, especially you could also talk about with religious people how that would work as well, but just generally from people with different opinions to you, do you have any like strategies that you use in your at least just plant a seed in people's minds?
Yeah, that's a hell of a question. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any expert answers as such, and the thing I went to yesterday about that was a Skillshare rather than a talk. So it was just me and some other people who I organize with talking about these things rather than someone coming down and telling us how it should all be. But for myself, I don't know. I mean, I've spent a lot of time. I was in the Occupy Newcastle movement in 2011, a long time back, and that was a really problematic movement in loads of different ways. But I did spend a lot of time talking to I did spend a lot of time talking to like soft liberals and Tories on the street, and trying to convince them of effectively anarchist politics from wherever they were. And we were in the middle of the city, so they'd often been drinking or something. So they'd usually stick around for a conversation, and I think I got some quite interesting practice there. But certainly, I think one of the places we sort of got to was thinking about what sort of approaches are going to appeal to the person that you're talking to. And this is something that I actually totally fail to do in all of my videos, because I always try and aim them to try and be appealing to different groups, and then just end up slinging in a lot of really obviously anarchist stuff and ruining the effect. But yeah, I think, like, often trying to start the conversation from terms that the other person's going to agree with. So one of the things we discussed yesterday, actually, at this Skillshare I was at, was you know, for maybe someone who's a social liberal and is very committed to these sorts of liberal democracy values and things like that, the sort of things that liberalism pays lip service to but doesn't really do. I think one of the best ways in there is to really just try and hammer in on the concept of democracy and start sort of trying to question the way our democracy is done, and maybe go through some of the sort of more liberal stages with that, like talking about proportional representation and things like that, and eventually coming to, say, a localized direct democracy, federalized massively to build an anarchic society. And then off the back of that, you can even talk about capitalism in terms of how it disrupts democracy because people can buy votes and influence. And you can kind of get to a point where you, in my experience, often if you take it a step at a time, you can kind of have the other person agree with you every step of the way until you could get to the point where you say, okay, so what I've just described to you that you've mostly agreed with to this point is something that's like a socialist anarchism, actually. And that is the political position we've been moving towards here. And that's something I found can be effective. And also with like people who are more coming onto the right wing from working class communities and things like that, we also talked about trying to talk from an outsider perspective and trying to, in that case, not sound like a liberal at all, because obviously we're not, and highlight the fact that you also are sort of against the system as it is, but that you have a very different idea about how that can go, and try and find a way of relating that to them again. That's... Sorry, that was quite a long summary of a discussion yesterday. Do you guys have any ideas on this?
Democracy, where are you now? If the demos doesn't have the Kratos, then what's the point of democracy? Where are you now? Democracy. That's kind of the gist of it. When the people doesn't have the power, how do you call that thing democracy in a way, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is where you've got to build from, isn't it? You know, there's so much wrong with our democracy and how it works. There's so many arguments to build, and these are the sort of arguments I think that a lot of the time, from an anarchist perspective, you make quite a lot, you know, about direct democracy and things like that.
Yeah, I'll let Heffy say something. Her name is Heffy, by the way. I know you like her.
Hello, Heffy.
You know, democracy is about the people having power to affect their own interests, and not, you know, voting a few aristocrats just because, you know. Just saying. Heffy usually is right.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that is sort of worth remembering when you're trying to talk to people is, I think not everyone, saying everyone is a bit strong, but a lot of people do have quite sort of anti-authoritarian and quite socialist ideals if you dig down deep enough, even if they don't realize that they do. And I think that making these arguments about democracy and stuff like that can kind of bring them round to these positions, because I think this is one of the big problems I have with liberalism in general.
Yeah.
Liberalism loves to sell itself as this, you know, it's about equality, it's about democracy, it's about feminism, it's about free speech, it's about all of these things. And actually, it's really just about capitalism.
Yeah.
Any of these other things are just are tacked on insofar as they don't impede capitalism.
Yeah. It's like one step to the right of social democracy. One step to the right.
Yeah. And I really think there's a big problem with a lot of people who actually have quite switched on ideas sort of instinctually, but haven't researched them much. who identify themselves as liberals and maybe socially democratic, and who don't actually, realize that there's this whole scope of thought, this whole socialist or anarchist scope of thought that actually often much better matches their intrinsic views than these sort of liberal constructs that they've been taught to think are democratic and consensual and equal when they're not.
Yeah, and the whole thing of liberalism is that it's based on the foundation that some people are better than others anyway. It's like it's what was the despotismo ilustrado? What was like the how did he call them? The enlightened despots of the 18th, 17th century, like all for the people but without the people. I think it was, yeah. They said something like that. It was like a bunch of noble people saying, let's do something nice for the peasants, because come on, let's throw them a bone, right? It's not really like that, we have the power, motherfuckers. It doesn't work like that anymore. I mean, one of the mirages that supports all kinds of right-wing ideologies is that idea that some people are better just because, and that's inevitable. When it's being like analyzed like over and over and over and over, that no, not really. Those people are not. They're not better. They're just more luckier. They're just circumstances, and some of those power structures are based on that belief. If you don't believe that shit anymore, then everything falls apart. Everything just goes down like a house of cards, and liberalism is one of those things that keeps the dam from overflowing. It's one of those things that reinforce like the structure, because it's kind of the kinder or a better branded version of the same thing. I don't want to talk too much. When I ramble. It's just.
But yeah, I think there's that contradiction as well, in that we are continually sort of most people sort of know, and we see it in media all the time, in mainstream media and stuff. There's often subtle "don't trust the government" sort of messages and things like that, and people sort of know that governments can be out to get them, and yet in liberal and in far right movements, there's still this sort of idea that some people are intrinsically better, as you say, and that also, even though we know that governments and corporations aren't always good, that really actually happens to correlate really closely to the people who've been in power and controlling us and ruining our lives for the past 1,000 years or more.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, really, isn't it?
Paralysis fash in disguise. Liberal is just a fascist in a clever disguise. Just a fashion in disguise, just being nice. But when you acknowledge the same structures of power that are oppressing so many people, it's like they have us pinned against the wall. We feel the boot on our faces, and they still like, oh no, it's all we can figure it out. Like, no, we're not gonna figure shit out. We are gonna figure shit out. You shut the fuck up and get out of the way.
And yeah, and that is why liberalism is so much more sort of coherent with and compatible with fascism than it is with socialism.
Yeah, because when shit hits the fan, they're the ones that empower the fascists. Like,
absolutely.
Don't scream at them. Don't be. Oh, come on, be nice to them. They have their freedom of speech. The frozen peach. The peach is frozen. Don't give space to the fascists in your society. please don't give any space to fascists in your society and fascist ideas. Not even the people. The people they're just dummies, you know. But those bullshit ideas, you know, don't let them through. And I don't know, you know. And what can we do about them though? What can we do about them liberals? What can we do when they start yapping all that bullshit?
Well, I guess we've got to make them socialists. I mean, I think this is why this is why we've got to, you know, I personally think, you know, with the rise of the far right that we're having at the minute, and this is one of the reasons that I actually got really interested in looking more closely at liberalism as a philosophy, is that, you know, when Trump came to power, I was watching it and everyone was acting like, oh, this is this huge aberration. It's completely outside of the norms of our political reality. And I was just thinking back over like the last sort of 20 years of my life. And it's like, well, you know, Islamophobia, that's kind of something that the liberal establishment brought in with the war on terror and stuff like that. All of these security state and migration controls and stuff. Yeah, liberals have been playing with that for a long time.
Mhm.
I mean, the tools for something like the Trump administration or even the Bolsonaro administration or oh God, what's his name in Hungary or Viktor Orban, that these tools are all put there by the liberal power structure because it's really so close ideologically, and we're taught to think that fascism and liberalism are these two completely polar opposite philosophies. And yeah, I think it's because we failed to question and we demonized fascism and separated it from liberalism and failed to question the connection between these two things, that we have created the same contradictions again, which have resulted in the reemergence of this philosophy, which when I was growing up, we all kind of thought was mostly dead.
Yeah. And I mean, it is not about the liberals themselves. Like people who happen to be liberals, they're nice people. Most of them, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
The leaders, they're fucked up because the people on top, they know what they're doing. They have an agenda. They wanna make business. But the people who are in like everyday regular people who are like within a liberal framework, we need to get them out. We need to fetch them out of there, and go like, you know. You know, I mean, you mean well, but check it out. Check the systemic problems that we have right now, and check how this connects to that other thing. And you know, it's just, you know, trying to have their eyes open, you know, because they're good people. They're not bad people. They're not. They don't have the agenda their leaders have. They don't have that problematic business mindset, or say they may have that, you know, but they mean well. And when they mean well, we need to really get them and say, hey, this is how you do the right thing. And it's good. It's good for everybody. You know, that's how you're going to succeed in making people's lives better, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think one of the main problems that I come across when I speak to liberals is that a lot of the time they agree with me or come around to agreeing with me at least, but then they say that my ideas or anti-capitalism is too unrealistic, or that the changes to, like, bringing about an anti-capitalist system is going to take. What are the our planet or something like that, but that never seems to be that satisfactory for them. So do you have a good response to this kind of thing when people say it's unrealistic that I could maybe use?
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I mean, I suppose the obvious answer I might come out with that is like, oh, well, you know, in sort of 1816 or something in America, people would have said abolishing slavery was unrealistic. Or, you know, at every point where every sort of social change needs to happen, just before it, people say it's unrealistic. I really like, actually, as an example, I don't really much like to refer to Lenin. I'm not a fan. But there is a quote, I can't reference this, I can't remember where I read it, from Lenin about a year before the Russian Revolution in 1916, where he's talking about, we may not see it, our children may not see it, our children's children may not see it, but we must build to one day have socialism. And it's really, really clear just 12 months before the revolution that, Lenin has no idea that there is going to be a revolution soon. Absolutely, thinks he's on a long building process and stuff like that. I think that's an important story to remember, both for trying to show people that radical change can happen when you don't expect it, and also for ourselves, actually, I think, because it's really easy to get very down about the lack of hope for change, and I've been there loads of times. But I think it's always a little bit reassuring to think, like, when there's been huge changes in the past, actually, even months or even weeks beforehand, people have no idea it's going to happen. This is why I think the job of left groups isn't really necessarily to foment a revolution or something like that. I think you have to spread information and help people organize, but in the end, probably if a revolution ever happens, it's going to happen by itself, and any left groups around are going to be chasing to try and catch up when people start doing stuff. And then how successful we are, how well our ideas penetrate into that revolutionary mindset, really is a matter, as far as I'm concerned, of how much good building work we've done beforehand, which is why we need, again, to be building in communities and workplaces now, and trying to build organized groups that can actually engage in this sort of resistance.
I mean, in that I would take a page or two from the Marxist Leninist Maoist people, like the revolution as a design process, to be efficient and effective. I would let them have the lead on that, but I can take also a page like from the anarchists, saying like if you wanna counter power, you need to build parallel power structures, and if you don't like the police, you can make like neighborhood watches that are not police, that are not behaving like police, and they can counter the bad deeds of police. And if you don't like the social security, you can recruit like people that with knowledge of expertise on medicine, and make like a people's clinic, that doesn't depend on the powers that be, and so on. So I mean, if you take one and the other, and if you make both of all of them happen, the diversity of tactics happen, it could be like a good thing. And in a way, and I think we leftists have the same problem. Wait a second. Okay. we leftists have like a little bit of the same problem. Like we have internalized in our heads this idea that the system is too strong to counter it. Things are, and there's a good point there. Like people don't like change. If something is working, it's working bad, but it's working, why change it, right? I've been using this my whole life, or for whatever decades I've been doing this bourgeois democracy. Why am I gonna change to an actual democracy? And so we need, maybe another angle could be like tearing down the ideological foundations that make things happen, like the anti-capitalist concepts, like your boss steals from you every month. Simple messages like that, grounded. We're not going to talk about surplus and Marxist analysis and complex things, but we can say little quippy sentences like your boss is stealing from you. The rich are stealing from you. They're taking money, they're grabbing money out of your pocket as we speak, out of our pockets, everybody's pocket. So, one thing at a time, you build that conscience, you make the parallel power structures, you create the master plan and the strong armies that the MLs work on, and so efficiently, you grab a piece from every, and apply it locally to whatever your circumstances are. Because with every local community, it's going to change. It's going to be like different. So it's kind of tricky and complicated, but at the same time, it's as simple as do something. Get out there and do something.
I think you put it really well there. It's like really complicated, but actually also it is just as simple as get out there and do what you can.
Yeah.
exactly. I'm gonna have to be back in a second because I really need to nip to the toilet. I'm really sorry.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, bladders exist. Go
Yeah.
for it. No worries.
Yeah, I'm being bladder positive.
Go for it. What do you people think about it? Like this system being like too strong or too apparently too strong, and if it's really that strong or not?
So I don't know, when you guys were talking about this, I think like revolutionary movements, they come across the time, and they were like, they actually build day by day, like he was actually saying before, that we have to do sorry, just even if we do little by little, like in the schools and education, also go through like very crisis situations, like when we have the Russian Revolution. Like you have like a huge crisis there in Russia before you had something as to really bad as to happen, so people can feel really uncomfortable and try to change. But further than this, even if we have this situation, it's more complicated than this, because after what happened, like after the revolution itself, is usually connected to a feeling like, okay, so we're gonna do this, and it must be completely different, it must be like perfect, but we have to know that we're still raised in a capitalistic system, so it won't be just from day to night that we would totally change our mindset, like, and lots of people totally change their mindset. You were talking about like, oh, slavery, living with no slaves was like unrealistic in the slavery time, and that's true, but we're still dealing with what happened in the past. We're still dealing with the consequences for having slavery in countries as South America and the whole America continent, like, so it's not something that would change easily, and that's why when we're talking about changing the system, we also have to talk about how we grew awareness in young people.
Like the
And
colonizing minds, right?
yeah, exactly, how we actually grew awareness in young people, what these young people are exposed to, and what we as grown-ups are discussing, and how we are actually dealing with the movement now, because we cannot expect that our mindset will be completely different from what our parents were, because it's not like this. It's something that this is real. Like, the real change would not be for us to see, or our children or our grandchildren. It's something that takes like long time. If you compare even with the slavery system, you see we're still dealing with the consequences even from today, like, and it's like, and G is like 60 years ago, like 100 years ago. So it takes time, and it's a battle that we have to keep going. Like, it's not something that in the first time that it gets that we get into controversial topics, that people just say like, yeah, it's not working, let's go back to the other side. Like, it's more than this. It takes longer than we actually expect as human beings, you know and for us to change culture and change, to have like a real revolution. Like, of course that it's possible, and we have to keep in mind that it is possible, but it's not something that will come easy, because our mindset still attached to what happened in the past. Like, we're still dealing with consequences for things that were in long past. Like, we never seen as children, but we were raised in the same mindset. We're still fighting for other things too. Like, so changing the system also, it's more complicated than just us adults going to against the system. Like, it's something that it takes longer than this. I don't know if it makes sense. It makes
Yeah, like
sense.
it's a very big work. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And,
Yeah.
and it also, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And it also takes a lot of work in ourselves. I think. I think what you're saying about how we all have so much work to deal with this huge problem, and I think it's something that starts very very much in ourselves, in how we are sort of conditioned into the system. And I think the system is that capitalism and authority and things like that are actually, we can understand them in a very similar way in some ways to how we can understand and how they affect society, in a similar way to how we understand some forms of abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all, as people who've grown up under capitalism, have to deal with our own psychological scars from the system, from the things that it promotes, like racism, like patriarchy, like just the promotion of sort of competition and capitalist values that we can become incredibly heavily ingrained in our lives. And from the things like gender norms, patriarchal norms, and sort of capitalist sort of social norms are really enforced on us in a very direct and intense way, which can be quite difficult to psychologically break, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like in a way, they're all related. Like speciesism, sexism, racism, capitalism, basically. Yeah. We understand the world as a market, and for instance, like when we get unemployed, our self-worth is affected. Like I don't have a job. I'm worth less than when I used to have a job and stuff like that. It happened to me. I like
Yeah.
I surprised myself manspreading on a bus, and I surprised myself, saying, that's poor animal, they don't know better and shit like that. We all surprised ourselves along our lives doing all that kinds of bullshit, and it's not like we meant ill. We had like an ill intent. It's like that bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's there in our coconuts.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
how we raised and how we are educated. So that's why I was saying like it's something that we have to start thinking more how we are dealing with the young communities that are involved in the socialism, or even with the youngs that are not involved in this, how we deal with young people, because it's how we raise and how we are educated. And it's, yeah, it has to change when we younger, because when we are adults it's a little bit more difficult, but it still can happen. So yeah.
I think there's some really exciting stuff happening in that direction at the moment as well, with the youth climate strikes. That's so exciting, and a lot of young people are really learning about taking action on issues that matter, and I think that's really inspiring and wonderful. And I think also, there's this weird thing with which when I was growing up we would never have imagined was possible. You've seen in like what is it, Teen Vogue, and a lot of these like young women's magazines now printing articles about anarchism, about sex work, about feminism, about all these very like really amazing issues. I really think that maybe some of the children growing up today absorbing this sort of information from their media are going to grow up much better emotionally adjusted and socially adjusted, and maybe even politically adjusted than people of our generation and things like that.
That's what we hope so, right? That's what my mom hoped when she was younger, and my grandfather too. That's what we hope, and we keep them going further, not back to the past,
Don't you
not
think?
taking steps back.
Don't you think like as it's a little bit of poetry, like that backfired so well on the system, like in a way, as a certified old fart here. Don't you think it's kind of poetic that that we've been sold in advertising for decades that the young and the beautiful are like because, and then you kind of sense like there's a tricky thing there, like they're trying to sell us that the young are the cool ones because they they don't have like that critical thinking that the older people do, and in a way it backfired brutally with the youth climate strikes and all the other things that you've been saying now. Like there's a little poetry there. Like it backfire, motherfuckers.
This is where the cool youth are now.
Yeah, there you go. In your face.
And we are seeing that with young people. I mean, there's polls came out in the last couple of years which showed in America and in the UK, like millennials as a generation, all to a larger percentage prefer socialism to capitalism when asked in a questionnaire, which is, that hasn't translated into a huge, socialist revolutionary movement, but that's a much more fertile ground than when you look at the similar sort of figures for earlier.
Definitely. And there's one of the things that bugs me about this moving on from capitalism and trying to make the best out of this momentum to do some effective change for the better in our world is like a lot of people are like, there's a lot of people out there who read like a lot of theory. You guys are very knowledgeable. I'm a stupid fart. I'm winging it like everybody else. To be honest, everybody is winging it. But there's this feeling like everybody's going back to Lenin and Mao, and everybody's going back to Kropotkin and Malatesta. Everybody's going back to those revolutions that happened in the 20th century and all those theories that were developed in the 19th century. The thing is, in the 19th and 20th century, we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have like this surveillance state that we have right now, big data and bullshit, and the Steve Bannons out there that are like the modern Goebbels, and it's kind of disconcerting, like in a way, like. I mean, take a page from those books, but maybe we need to figure something new out, considering the circumstances today in the modern world and every different locality that has it different. Like, it's not the same in a former colonizer country than in a former colonized country, for instance. I don't know. I'm just winging it. I just throw it out there.
No, I actually think like I might piss off a lot of socialists and anarchists watching, and maybe some of my friends, by saying that actually sometimes, and I have read a lot of like traditional socialist theory and traditional anarchist theory, but sometimes I just find that stuff really boring to read. Like I sort of think once you've read a certain amount of like, these sort of Kropotkin or Bakunin or someone like that, I mean, maybe once you've read a certain amount of it, it's sort of like you read more of it, it's like you're telling me the same thing and you're telling me the same thing. So a lot of the time for me, I do think, while I don't think, some people try and phrase this argument like we need new ideas, we need something that's not anarchism or communism or something like that. And I think in some ways the ideas are sort of there. Maybe we need to modify them, but I think, some of these traditional forms still have a lot to offer. But I think in terms of once you've got a decent grounding in what those different ideologies are, I think you can get a bit too stuck in just reading things from that sort of classic canon and not reading like new texts, which can be really enlightening, even if they're not written by people with the same political perspective as you, or texts that disagree with you, which I sometimes think can be really fun just because you get to critique them and take them down afterwards, which I enjoy anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good takeaways in those philosophies. It's just that circumstances are different. We need. It's not that we need to throw them away and go like, forget about it. But they don't need to be treated like the Bible, because procedure may be a little bit different under the surveillance state and all these new fascist mindsets that are a little bit more resilient in a way, and in a way more fragile in other vectors. It's very complex. We need to do like a big yes and, like we always say in the left. Like there's no, there's never a no, but a yes and that's what it should be. Then we bicker at each other and we go cannibal left all the way. But that's what we should do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think diversity of tactics is super important in this way. That the more of us are trying different things in different ways, the more chance that one of the things we try is going to work.
Yeah.
When you talk about, I feel like it's very common to at the end of so many different leftist YouTube channels is people saying like, oh, we should organize in our communities and everything like that, and that's what you were saying, Dee, as well. And for like people listening who might like, or people in general, how would you, what, because I feel like that gets thrown around a lot, but what does that actually mean in practice? Like, how would you go about community, and like what would you organize around, or like have suggestions for organizing around within your community?
Well, this is very...
What would that actually practice?
Well, I've tried to answer this question quite a lot in my upcoming video, actually, but I'll have a go now quickly.
Go for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for my experience, the main experience in organizing that I have is in trade unions. I have worked in a liberal union for a bit, but I also worked with an anarcho-syndicalist union for a while called Solfed, where we used to... sadly, there's not a branch in my area anymore, but there was a lot of overwork and burnout. But yeah, but so we worked on workplace organizing principles where you try and build in your workplace by trying to offer small victories first. Try and have the conversations that can help you find out what the issues are, and then once you know about what the issues are in your workplace, because you should always work with the people that you're working with. You shouldn't be coming into anywhere and being like, I know the solution. Coming into your workplace and like, we must have a strike immediately for double our pay or something like that. People aren't necessarily going to buy it off the bat. But one of the techniques that is often taught in workplace organizing is sort of going in, having the conversations and building sort of a group that can work together to try and achieve this. And then sort of taking it in steps, not going straight in and saying, we're going to have a strike. You can do little actions, slow downs and sit-ins and things, and maybe just with very easy goals to start with, like, maybe an extra 5-minute break, or 5 minutes more on the lunch hour. Or a very common problem I've heard in workplaces where people are upset because smokers get slightly more breaks because they go out for cigarettes, and the ability for non-smokers to also take a 5-minute break every so often to just go out for a cigarette, not for a cigarette even. And think this sort of a little micro issue, which is maybe a much easier victory, and then from there you can work forward and try and work for bigger and bigger victories. And people learn solidarity together, they learn about how to struggle together, and they learn techniques, and they learn that by working together they can achieve things they want to achieve. And I think it's really important that in these sorts of processes, we're not going in and saying, we want to do this, we want you to help us. You're going in and saying, what are your problems, what are the things you need to achieve, here are some strategies by which we might achieve them, and that we allow people to take the lead in their own struggles. This is again something Dee Hunter emphasizes a lot in Chav Solidarity as well. It's really important, just as with when we talk about organizing as white allies with people of color, we don't want to take dominating roles in that. We don't want to be trying to tell them how to fight their oppression that they experience. We want to support them in the tactics and the methods that they choose. And I think approaching any community has got that element in it, where you have to look at the needs and the wants of that community. I think in community organizing, you do it very similar. You have to sort of try and get people together around the issues that actually concern them in a community, and try and help them find ways to work together to overcome those issues through anything from petition to sit-in to direct action to, in community organizing, there's ideas. Plan C in the UK talk a lot about social strikes at the minute, like rent strikes and unions against landlords. These can be very, very good sort of tactics to try and build towards in community organizing. And just to add one more thing on this long list of things, I also think particularly in community organizing, because in union organizing, you can bring sort of, if you've got an organization like we did with Solfed, you're bringing this sort of anonymity. You can stand in between the workers and the boss and protect the workers from being too visible by being officially named union organization rather than being the workers together exposing themselves and risking getting fired. So you have something to bring to the table there. I think in community organizing, it's very important to try and, I mean, I think you can do it without this, and there are groups that go and just door knock and try and build meetings around that, and that can work. I think that's also a great thing to do, but I think often it can be easier if you try and bring something to the community first and find out a need that's not being met in that community, be it a food bank or a clothes bank or a place where you can go to get assistance with benefit problems, where people know what, you can educate yourself on how to help people with those sorts of problems, legal support, all this sort of thing, help for people who they're just about to massively expand stop and search in this country if Boris Johnson gets his way. So, there might be a big need for support groups that are able to help people understand their rights if they're searched, or understand how to fight back against these sorts of police repression and things like that. And, if you find the issues that affect a community and you can try and provide something for it, then you're not just someone coming in and preaching, oh, we can make a better world for the workers, or we can make life better, like 1,000 snake oil salesmen have in the past. Because, this is what Tommy Robinson does. This is what the fascists do. They come and they say, we're going to make life better for you. And, this is what mainstream politicians do as well. And I think that doing community work like that, even sometimes if it's with a liberal organization, like a soup kitchen or something like that, rather than an autonomous organization, which obviously might be preferable as well, like an anarchist organization. I think this is really important at building a sort of recognition that you are actually there to help, and that you actually have the best interests of the people that you're dealing with at heart, rather than just wanting their support to better your cause or your ambitions for power or whatever this sort of thing might be.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the right appeals to those feelings, those basic feelings, the fear and the envy and they work so well under this system. Like for, I think for us in the left, it's a disadvantage because we have like so many arguments. But how many feelings can we appeal to, except for maybe hope, and then things don't work out the way they should in a very short term, and people get disappointed and you lose them right away.
Well, I think we have to appeal to solidarity in some ways more than anything, particularly with a lot of these, again, going back to Chav solidarity, with a lot of very deprived communities. Actually, although some of these people might be easily taken in by fash ideas and stuff like that, we can approach the fact ideas of solidarity and the fact that actually, a lot of these sorts of spaces have very high levels and high traditions of solidarity. People look out for each other. People are willing to go and thump that guy around the corner because he said something bad to your mate or something like that, which, may not be the way we want to inflect it, but it's a form of solidarity.
It is.
And people, people are always lending each other money, giving people space to sleep, passing the salt at a dinner table. We live incredibly communistic lives, actually. And I think, even in communities which are susceptible to fascism, a lot of people in their everyday lives practice very communalistic sort of relations and a lot of solidarity. I think this is a very powerful thing. If we practice solidarity with those people and try and connect to their own networks of solidarity, I think this is a very powerful thing that we might be able to do to empower these groups and build our own movements.
Yeah, it's exactly. I totally agree with you. I think it's solidarity. It's one of the most important things that we have to put in practice. Like this is super important. But I have to say something is that it's quite late here, and I actually have to go home now. But it
Oh,
was a huge pleasure to be here with you guys today. It was really important. I was really interested in to listen what you have to say because I didn't know your channel before, and now I know, and I'm very it's a big pleasure to talk with you and to meet you. It was really nice conversation, guys. You were amazing. It's really good to be with you again. So,
Oh,
huge kisses.
Julia
thank you
querida,
very much.
descansa. Mwah. You're a part of this. You're a part of this. You're a part of the Socialist Sunday stream. You're
Bye.
definitely part of it. You're gonna cover out for me a lot of times because I'm gonna be very
Yeah,
busy. telling you.
I can. Yeah,
And-
today I will do it for Paul, and I'm still like I have to say I hope everything's turning better for him today. I really hope to hear like good news soon.
Yes,
So
Paul, solidarity to you, my brother.
yeah, exactly. We are.
What's up with
Okay.
Paul? I don't think anyone's told me about this.
He's having some family issues right now.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm really
exactly.
sorry. Yeah,
No,
solidarity.
but it's turning out well. It's just needs to take care of things. So
Yeah.
solidarity aplenty for our
Exactly.
Irish hero.
Solidarity.
It's solidarity. It's also being there when your friends need you. So yeah, I think this is something we should practice in our daily life too. Like so I'm very happy to have this to share this moment with you guys. It was amazing.
By the way, Julia, here comes the pressure again. Make your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People
yeah.
keep asking and asking, when is she making her channel? Does she have a channel?
No, I don't have a channel, and I don't tend to have one. As
Then you
too
know what to
soon.
do.
I think we would all watch if you did.
There you go.
If one day I'd have it, I would tell you guys. You guys would be the first ones to know. So okay, I really have to go now. Like huge
Really
kisses,
lovely-
bye bye.
Beijinhos.
Really lovely to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you for a fantastic
Beijinhos.
conversation.
Nice conversation.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. The union, what is the union something? I forgot about it.
Because the union makes us strong.
Exactly. There you go.
Any of my friends watching now are going to laugh so much that you played
Guys, we've
that.
been talking.
Because I often complain, I'm really sorry, but that's like my least favorite traditional socialist song. I find it so cheesy. It's a great message, but
Yes. I mean, it's for
Pretty
once
much.
it's us who recuperate something. Yeah, there's the glory,
Yeah.
hallelujah, and there's the solidarity
Yeah.
forever, motherfucker. There you go.
that's true. Yeah, maybe that makes it better. Yeah.
Yeah. You were saying, Catherine, please. Sorry, because we get worked up.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was eating my orange.
That's fantastic.
I was just going to say, we've been speaking for an hour and a half.
Yeah, because time flies when you're
I don't
having
know,
fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we could end it soon or here, or what do you guys want to do?
Yeah, let's wrap it up, and we
Yeah,
do
yeah.
another one soon. What do you think? What do you think? Dumpster flower.
What, me? Yeah, yeah.
The D to
I'm
the
happy
F.
come on. I'm happy to come on whenever you like. This has been really great. I've really enjoyed being here. and
It's
thank you
fantastic.
so much.
So let's sing. Let's sing again.
Tell you what, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I could
you got a
try.
guitar
If you
over
tell
there.
us- If you tell us, I do not have a guitar. I have a trumpet.
What?
I could give it a go if you tell me what key you're playing
Hey,
in.
Yes.
That would be fun.
It's A major. A major. Let's play in A major.
Oh,
La mayor.
this might be
Sorry.
incredibly
Spanish
nasty. I don't think I've ever tried to play Solidarity Forever before. Oh, and I can't even get the zip open on my trumpet case right now. Ah, there we go.
There you go. Right in tune. So solidarity
Solidarity
forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, 'cause the union makes us strong. Again, solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. 'Cause the union makes us
strong.
Thank you everybody for coming to the Socialist Sunday stream.